Have you ever wondered what it would be like to travel by yourself through a city that sounds both familiar and completely new to you? What if that city is Sydney, where opera and surf merge, where the sun-kissed harbor meets rocky cliffs, and where a lone visitor can find thrill and tranquility everywhere? After years of traveling through vibrant U.S. cities, serene European towns, and busy Asian cities, I finally made it to Sydney. Yet, nothing fully prepared me for Sydney's mixture of urban and natural elements. I went on guided tours, explored its areas, climbed its viewpoints, and sat alone with the breeze on a ferry that crossed the harbor during the course of the next 2 weeks. I'll take you on my 14-day adventure in this episode, from famous sights to obscure corners, from a walk by the bay in the morning to lights on the bridge at night. I'll share what caught me off guard, what felt like places I'd been before, and what was entirely different. Follow along if you want to join me on a journey into Sydney's heart and soul. This is a story of exploration, isolation, and awe. It was a clear, crisp morning when I arrived in Sydney. I could see the beautiful harbor sparkling below as my plane approached. I was thrilled to be here at last. Despite lots of traveling experience, this was my first visit to Australia. I've taken tuk-tuks in Southeast Asia, strolled the cobblestone streets of Europe, and even navigated the New York City subway. However, Sydney had a different feel. It was large but laid back, modern but full of nature. I left my bag at a tiny hostel in the city center, close to Circular Quay. There were yachts bobbing in the harbor that I could see from my window. On the first day, I decided to walk around and stretch my legs. I walked past the Opera House and along the waterfront. I was surprised by the building, which appeared as enormous shells placed on a stage. The Opera House is more creative and natural, although I do recall going to the Royal Albert Hall in London. I was glad to be here at last. I then went over to the Sydney Harbour Bridge. Instead of doing the entire bridge climb, which is expensive and requires reservations, I went on a guided walking tour. A 2-hour walking tour across the bridge and around its pylon outlook cost roughly $50. The guide shared stories about the bridge's construction, history, and connection between North and South Sydney. The city appeared as a painting from above, with parks, harbors, and skyscrapers. I kept walking for the first 3 days. I walked through Sydney's historic district, the Rocks, where winding lanes lead to old pubs and sandstone buildings. I pictured Sydney in the 19th century, when ships anchored in this harbor and prisoners lived here. The Rocks felt less depressing and more bright, but it was a bit like of Edinburgh's old town. Then I went to the Botanic Gardens. Walking there is free, and I spent hours looking down at the Opera House under the large gum trees. The fresh smell of leaves and sea filled the breeze. I read a book I had brought from home on a quiet bench. Despite being in a crowded city, I felt relaxed, like I had my own little world to myself. I took a ferry to Bondi Beach on the 4th day. The one-way fare of the ferry from Circular Quay is about $7 Australian. I had the feeling that I was on an ancient sea adventure as the boat glided across the water. When I arrived at Manly, I had fish and chips by the water, walked on the sand, and watched surfers ride waves. It was sunny, laid back, and reminded me of a beach town I had visited in Costa Rica. After a few days, I made arrangements to go on a day trip to the Blue Mountains with a guide. I found a small group tour that included transport, a guide, and stops at important viewing spots including Echo Point and the Three Sisters, for roughly $150 Australian. When we got there, the tall eucalyptus trees, deep valleys, and centuries-old cliffs gave me the impression that I had entered another world. I breathed clean fresh air while watching kangaroos jump through the bush. The guide explained to us the stories of the Aboriginal people who regarded the mountains as sacred. I learned many things that I never knew before. I toured Taronga Zoo one afternoon. The return ferry ride from Circular Quay cost about $25 Australian. The cost of admission to the zoo was $49 Australian. I watched platypuses, kangaroos, and koalas for hours. The zoo's viewing platforms above the hills gave a breathtaking view of Sydney's skyline behind the animals. Unlike zoos I've visited in Asia, this one seemed to aim to blend in with nature rather than dominate it. I spent some time on Darling Harbour back in the city. I watched the boats, went to the Maritime Museum, and walked along the esplanade. The cost of a ticket to the Marine Museum was approximately $30 Australian. I discovered how the sea greatly shaped this city, how Australia's navy developed, and how people used to travel here. I joined several walking tours in the city centre because I was traveling alone. I left a tip of about $10 after taking a free walking tour of the rocks. Additionally, I had the chance to sample local foods, including meat pies, fresh oysters, and coffee, during a food tour that cost roughly $90 Australian. The guide showed me old markets, tiny cafes, and hidden lanes with street art. Despite initial shyness, I liked speaking with the guide and the other people on the tour. I used to start my mornings by jogging across the harbor bridge. I felt powerful while watching the sunrise. This city was built with walking in mind. I enjoyed slower nights. I saw the light bounce off the sails as I sat on the steps of the opera house. I sometimes heard someone near playing the guitar. I felt small but safe. I made a quick detour to Bondi Beach in the middle of my journey. From the city, I took a bus. It cost about $4 Australian. I took the popular Bondi to Coogee Coast Walk, which is a about 6-kilometer path along a cliff. The views were stunning, with little bays, rocky outcrops, and breaking waves. It felt more alive than the calm coasts of Southeast Asia, but also less restricted than the European coastline I had walked down in Greece. I once tried a kayak tour in the harbor. For 2 hours, it cost roughly $120 Australian. I paddled on the calm water close to the city, past the opera house, and under the harbor bridge. The guide revealed hidden coves and gave safety tips. I felt small in the big blue ocean when I rested on my paddle and just closed my eyes. I went to museums another day. I went to the New South Wales Art Gallery. Special exhibits cost about $25, although entry was free. I saw modern art, Aboriginal art, and landscapes inside. Unlike some of the galleries I saw in New York, it felt a bit deeper and spiritual. I also paid an additional $25 for a ticket to the Museum of Contemporary Art near the harbor. I saw contemporary art, which was usually odd yet beautiful, colorful, and inspiring. When I wanted to go farther at night, such as to a restaurant in Surrey Hills or a rooftop bar in Barangaroo, I usually hired a taxi. Though at times, the taxis were expensive. Depending on the journey, a ride may cost between $20 and $40 Australian. However, since I traveled light and knew how to use my phone to hail or summon a cab, I felt comfortable ordering a cab. I took a ferry to Watson's Bay, which is about 30 minutes out from Circular Quay, on day 10. The cost of the ferry was between $8 and $10 Australian. I walked along cliffs to the south head overlooking Watson's Bay. The view was expansive and the wind was fierce. I had the best fish and chips I'd had in Australia while sitting on a sheer cliff. Then I saw how the city looked from there. The harbor bridge looked like a steel ribbon, and the opera house was tiny. Sitting on the ferry deck at nightfall and watching the city light up on the way back to Circular Quay is one of my favorite memories. Boats went slowly, the horizon glowed, and I felt relaxed. I slowed down during the second week. I stayed in a little Surrey Hills apartment. I prepared a few meals. I went to little bakeries, second-hand shops, and local markets. Many of the locals I spoke with told me they were originally from somewhere else. While some were elderly and had spent all of their lives in Sydney, others were young artists. I learned that Sydney is home to many people and is not only a tourist spot. I climbed up to Mrs. Macquarie's chair in the Botanic Gardens on day 13. It is a colonial-time sandstone bench. One of the most well-known postcard views may be seen from there, the opera house surrounded by blue sky and water. I was silent for a bit, just breathing and staring. I compared it to views I had seen in Lisbon, but the roofs here are brilliant blue, green, and white, while those in Lisbon are orange. I went shopping as well. Small boutiques in Paddington and Surrey Hills, not large shopping centers. Local labels, design boutiques, and vintage stores were all there. It was warmer and among big gum trees, similar to browsing in Melbourne. I had a guided walking tour of Haymarket and Chinatown on my last day. About $40 Australian was the cost of the tour. I tried herbal teas, street food, and dumplings. The tour guide told tales of the Chinese community in Sydney, including how they arrived and changed the city. I had a sense of belonging. I had been around Asia, But this was different since these tales were real, local, and linked to Sydney. I stood on a hill over the harbour that evening in the Royal Botanic Gardens. I grinned as I saw the bridge brightly lit and the opera house illuminated. Despite being by myself, I didn't feel lonely. There was more to this trip than just sightseeing. It was about finding who I was in an unfamiliar place. During my time there, I found out that Sydney is a city of contrasts: rock and water, old and new, peaceful and lively. It was similar to other locations, such as the cliffs of Europe, the galleries of New York, and the beach towns of Costa Rica, but it seemed unlike any other place I had ever been. I learned how to be open to the energy of the city while still getting used to being by myself. I appreciate you traveling with me across Sydney. I hope that my stories of catching boats, climbing to vantage spots, and walking alone inspired you to see this stunning city for yourself. I felt warmth, peace, and adventure even though I was traveling alone. If you enjoyed reading about my trip, please subscribe and write a review so I can share future journeys with you. Until the next time, I hope you discover a place that challenges, surprises, and perhaps even enriches you. My friend, have a safe journey.